shelling was relentless, there were snipers everywhere, and I just remember the feeling of exhaustion from being so petrified all the time.
It's worth knowing that, because when you see journalists who aren't reporting on the real Rio, please keep in mind that's also because they're in this mammoth bubble here.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is shown on over 30 cable stations from Vermont to New York City and in Washington, D.C. Our website is thestruggle.org, our YouTube channel, Struggle Video Media. Today, a reminder of a grim massacre in Syria. The latest about Aleppo, Dave Zirin from Rio and the Olympics, a Montreal march at the World Social Forum, news about the war on Yemen, a short interview about Armenia, and Bishop Selders of Moral Mondays. On August 21st, 2013, 1,400 people, including hundreds of children, died from sarin gas delivered by Assad regime missiles. With the current sieges and barrel bombs and threats of huge new massacres, the sarin attack is fading into memory. This memorial took place last year.
Shame on you! Barack Obama, shame on you! Barack Obama, shame on you! Barack Obama, shame on you! Barack Obama.
The third one to use chemical weapons is Bashar al-Assad. 2 days ago, our community is not the only community that is memorializing those children. 2 days ago in the same city, the city of Douma, was targeted by the Assad regime. A marketplace full of shoppers, women, elderly, and children was targeted, killing over 125 confirmed cases, all civilians. The world has done nothing to save the Syrian people. The U.S. administration led by Barack Obama has done nothing to stop the bloodshed in Syria. Brothers and sisters, ISIS or Daesh exists because of Bashar al-Assad and his chaos. ISIS exists because the world has failed to support the moderate Syrian opposition and put an end to the bloodshed. Thank you very much for joining us on this day, on this humanitarian day. Today our people in Syria, those civilians, see that Americans have come together to honor those victims. That Americans have come together to say no to the bloodshed, and it's time for Syria to be free. It is time for the chaos and instability in the Middle East to end.
Bashar killer! Bashar killer! Down, down, Bashar Assad! Down, down, Bashar Assad! Free, free Syria! Free, free Syria! Free, free Syria! Free, free Syria!
There is only one solution!
There is only one solution!
Revolution, revolution!
Revolution, revolution!
There is only one solution!
There is only one solution!
Free, free Syria!
Free, free Syria!
Long live Syria!
Now from testimony about Aleppo that took place at the United Nations last week.
I've been a war correspondent for more than 10 years. I have been to Iraq, Afghanistan, Gaza, and every terrible conflict that you can think of. I have never seen anything on the scale of Aleppo. There are no winners in Aleppo. And I was blown away by the scale of the destruction. You heard Dr. Attar. used the words apocalyptic wasteland, and this was 2012. The shelling was relentless, there were snipers everywhere, and I just remember the feeling of exhaustion from being so petrified all the time. The only thing I could think of was, this is actually hell. This is what hell feels like. And there's no way it can get any worse than this. But it did. It got a lot worse. Much worse. The thing that has been killed in Syria, that is much more difficult to rebuild than a bombed out building, is trust. There is no trust. No trust in the Assad regime, no trust in ceasefires or cessation of hostilities or humanitarian corridors, no trust in the Russians, and no trust in you, by the way, in us, in the international community, who have been wringing their hands on the sidelines while hospitals and bakeries and schools have been bombed, while phosphorus and cluster bombs have killed countless civilians. Let me explain something. The ones who have decided to stay, year in and year out, who have braved the relentless bombardment day in and day out, most of them don't plan on leaving. They made a decision a long time ago that they would rather die in dignity in their homes than leave.
Under threat of U.S. attack, Assad did get rid of many chemical weapons, but not all. One hears about bombs filled with chlorine that are dropped on Syrian cities, thankfully with much less effect than sarin. Speaking of Syria, read my article in the New Haven Register calling for peaceful but immediate support of Syrians. We link to it at thestruggle.org. Sports writer Dave Zirin has been in Brazil talking about the social aspects of the Olympics. Zirin writes for The Nation magazine and does a podcast at his website edgeofsports.com. Here are two clips from Rio.
Hey, just leaving about 6 hours of fencing, and the main thing we wanted to get across to folks here is that this is like the main Olympic park, and it's in like an absolute concrete kind of wasteland that's being developed as a new center for wealth in Rio. And it couldn't be more different than the smaller Olympic area at Copacabana, which is right on the beach. People know Copacabana, you know, his name is Rico, he wore a diamond, all that stuff. I mean, that is a scene that makes you think of Rio. This is much more a scene that makes you think of suburban sprawl in Miami Beach. And it's worth knowing that, because when you see journalists who aren't reporting on the real Rio, please keep in mind that's also because they're in this mammoth bubble here. And most of them are staying inside of this bubble. And so for them to report outside the bubble actually means sort of doing what we've been doing, and that's living outside the bubble. It took us over like 2 hours to get here. But if you're staying inside it, you're not going to leave and then come back. So that's the important thing for folks to know, is that if you feel like journalists aren't telling you what's happening on the ground in Brazil, it's because they're not really on the ground in Brazil. They're here in Olympic Park. And this has about as much to do with Rio as Disneyland has to do with Orange County, California. That's it. I'm Dave. Peace. Hey, we're back here at Vila Autodromo. This is the community we've been talking about all week. It was 650 families down to 24. People displaced to make way for Olympic Park. And back here with Stephanie. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. So I just wanted to show folks a couple of things before I turn to Stephanie for some commentary. First, you see these are all the houses that were built just very recently for the residents who were the last holdouts. But there's one house left standing right over there. That's the last of the original Vila Autodromo homes. So please get a sight of that. And behind me, you'll see it says "Stop Removing Ethnic Exclusion and Social Cleaning Game." Obviously, that's written in English, because right over that way is all the people coming back and forth from the metro. And so this is a message, obviously, for Western Europe and the United States, Canada, for the English-speaking. See this? Folks coming right around. So now bring it back to Stephanie. definitely this gathering happening here today, of course, for people to remember Villa Todrimo. Why has this place become so symbolic? Why is it so important?
Throughout this whole process of the city removing Villa Todrimo, they've always really relied on supporters, but they've always tried to have this very welcoming community vibe to remind people that this is where people live. People gather and have music, they cook food, they come together, and the fact that they are still doing this in the face of, you know, the media center that shadows above it.
Yeah, that's the media center and the Courtyard Marriott shadowing Villa Todrimo. It's only been there for what, a couple of months, right?
Yeah, and even though 20 families were able to remain in their homes, it's also a reminder for all those families that were displaced that they're welcome here still.
And there's music in the background, there's people gathering all the way there behind us. Last question, what do you think is going to happen to these 20 families, the holdouts? Do you think they're going to be able to remain here? Because we all know that this entire area is going to be developed by a billionaire. So we got like 30 seconds left. What do you think? Are they going to stay?
I think at this point they are going to stay. The city has plans to build 2 schools with former stadiums, and they do still have legal protection. So.
Montreal was the location this August for the World Social Forum, with 15,000 attending and hundreds of meetings and workshops. The WSF was sponsored by all levels of the Canadian government, including subsidies. However, more than 200 visas were rejected by the Canadian national government for some of the international participants. On the streets of Montreal, some 20,000 participated in a parade with virtually all civil society associations of Montreal participating. Abraham Weizfeld shot these videos of people holding a mammoth Palestinian flag.
Oui, Palestine viva, Palestine vaincra, free, free Palestine.
Yeah, we love Palestine.
Whoa. Viva, viva Palestina! Très bien. Boycottons l'apartheid d'Israël. Pas israélien, pas israélien, d'Israël. Des métallos.
Israël criminel.
Trudeau complice.
Israël assassine les enfants de Palestine. Israël assassine les enfants de Palestine. Israël assassine les enfants de Palestine.
The Saudi princes ended their truce and resumed their aggression against Yemen. Recent bomb runs have included a potato chip factory and a Doctors Without Borders supported hospital. Obama has supported the Saudi army to the hilt and has just approved another $1 billion in arms sales. Congress can knock it down, but has only 30 days to do that. Interestingly, the New York Times, which has been writing more and more critical articles about Saudi Arabia over the last year, has come out with a full-scale editorial calling for weapons sales to Saudi Arabia to be suspended. That's a major development. Medea Benjamin, perhaps the best-known activist in the United States, has just published a book about the Saudis and the U.S. connection. She's on a multi-month book tour and will be coming to Connecticut August 29th and 30th. Here are a number of Yemeni Americans and others protesting the Saudi-U.S. war on Yemen earlier this year.
1, 2, 3, 4, stop the bloody Yemen war. 1, 2, 3, 4, stop the bloody Yemen war. 1, 2, 3, 4, stop the bloody Yemen war.
Where innocent civilians are being killed every day. Children, women, elderly. It's all supported by the U.S. government. Yemen did not start a war with Saudi Arabia.
When leaving a Left Forum panel on Palestine, we noticed people lined up for the next panel, this one on Armenia. They carried this striking banner supporting Palestine and Armenia. I spoke to one of the people holding the banner, Anush Tertalian. She's a war veteran for 8 years in the Armenian armed forces during its struggle with neighboring Azerbaijan.
We only have a minute or two before you start your session, so could you explain these two pictures?
Okay, this is Turkish lies. They, in the United States, spent $200 million on denial of the Armenian genocide, and we have Eastern Turkey is really occupied Western Armenia. There are over 300 ancient Armenian villages that were totally depopulated. The Turks, skinned people alive, nailed them to crosses, sent them into death marches in the Syrian desert, and a third of the Armenian nation was killed just in a matter of years, and now there's Armenian refugees throughout the Middle East, Christian refugees that are being killed. And so this is their lies. They constantly tell lies, and we constantly try to tell the truth. So thank God for Struggle TV.
And one last thing, the banner you had, it had Armenia and Palestine. If you could just talk about that for a second.
It's called Armenian and Palestine Sisters in Struggles because we both have occupied homelands, and the United States gives our taxpayers' money goes to fund money to Israel and also to Turkey, and they're both human rights abusers.
On Sunday, August 21st, Black Lives Matter activist Bishop John Selders will be speaking in Meriden, Connecticut at the Unitarian Church about his recent trip, or the recent trip of Moral Monday's delegation to Brazil just before the Olympics. Brazil has an awful police brutality program, and Selders went to brief activists there about Black Lives Matter's activist efforts in Ferguson, Missouri, and in Hartford, Connecticut. His debriefing about the trip will take place at 2 p.m. in the Meriden Unitarian Universalist Church. This is Selders speaking several months ago in Stratford, Connecticut.
And there are way too many things, too many systems of things that we can make a difference in if we just say we're not doing it that way no more. We're going to take all of your money. Stop it. Stop it today. And if enough of us turn up about it, and you're right, it really, actually, it just takes a relatively few numbers We were 75 that showed up at City Hall. The media reported hundreds. Thank the Lord. What we were told is they heard the hordes coming, descending on Harvard, right? So that's what you want. You that relative few. Look at who Dr. King, but let's be clear. It was Coretta. It was Fannie Lou Hamer. All right, it was Ella Baker. There were all kinds of leaders in every little town and hamlet that they worked in that were together, ranked together. It was Corey, it was Snick. We were all over the place. Stokely was doing his thing, and all kinds of leaders were leading the civil rights movement, right? The Black Lives Matter movement is the same. It is decentralized, and so there are leaders all over the place, but they're working in concert. They're doing different things. They're strategic, they're smart, they're inventive, they're doing all kinds of funky things. Like, come on, I didn't think of that. We're doing that the next time. We're going to do that. Because they're smart, they're figuring it out, they're working it out. And it is in that, it's in this moment that we have an opportunity to be on the right side of history, folks. Period. And our ability, I want to say this too, our ability to understand what level of risk you can take, you're going to do that work on your own. Pamela and I have made a decision. This is it. This, we're going to ride on this one right here. We had to do some things. We're having to readjust our life. Baby, I can't be quiet on this. You know, and she was questioning, is this gonna mean we got to do something? Yeah, we're gonna get to do, and we're constantly having that conversation. All right? And just when I think, we might have to do something really, then something comes and blesses us. Somebody says, hey, there is the thing. Leaning into risk doesn't mean loss. Actually, it means gain. And I want to keep affirming that what you think is lost, what we lost in the sacrifices of these young people these recent days, has seeded this new form of revolutionary action that is changing not just this country, but the world. Have you seen what the campaigns are now? They got to deal with them Black Lives Matter. Yes. They got to deal. They all change their stuff because they get turned up on. And they're gonna have to be, and when they don't respond well, then they get another turn up, all right? And it is changing the political landscape in this country. But let me just say, it is not just here, it's all over the world. We're being messaged from all over the world now, who are checking in, piping in with what our young people are doing. I'm so very proud of them, I don't know what to do. They are winning a whole new fresh generation of political and social activism that you didn't do, they did, they are doing it. Yes.
So, and I wanted to just speak to that speak to this idea of fear. And the young people sitting before this tape got sick and tired of being sick and tired. You know, they were going to be dead anyway. You know, walk on the sidewalk, not walk on the sidewalk, they're going to get shot down. So forget it. You know, what I'm going to do is face you. And you who said I needed to fear you, I'm not fearing you, and I lose that. And when you lose that fear, because what we think what we fear is our source. You know, we feed it, we believe in it, we bow to it, we do a lot of things around what we fear. But when we let go of the fear, what we recognize, this is what you were talking about, is that the fear is not our source. It's not. It's what's holding us in check. You know, it's where we put our faith in, but we can let it go. We can face it, we can let it go, and choose to walk in that thing that we do believe in, that thing that we do know is the right thing. Not the fear of loss, not the fear of the gun,
not the fear of the bomb, not the fear of, so a lot of people are operating out of fear. I refuse to do that. I refuse to live my life with the foundation of fear.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. It is our duty to win. We must love and support each other. We must love and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. We have nothing to lose but our chains. God bless you. Good night. Good night.
That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. My name is Stanley Heller, and this is The Struggle.